Hello, I'm Pat Scieszinski, the current chair of the League of Women Voters of Door County. Right now, in every local government in the country, decisions are being made about how to spend the money allotted by the American Rescue Plan Act, otherwise known as ARPA. This very significant funding was made available to counties, cities, villages, towns, and school boards to mitigate the effects of the pandemic on communities, including ours. Door County now has a once-in-a-generation opportunity to make some real strides toward addressing significant gaps in our community, issues that the Door County League has cared about for a very long time. We want to ensure that this ARPA money is spent wisely with the greatest effect for our Door County community. In recent months, county government staff have been preparing proposals for using the ARPA funding. They were given direction from county board supervisors at a retreat last summer, where needs and ideas were brainstormed. After months of research and refining, a number of proposals are ready for serious consideration and possible adoption by the county board to be implemented by county staff. You may remember that the sober living crisis diversion housing proposal was the #1 county need that was identified during our 3-year mental health substance use study. The lack of this type of facility in our county was identified by department after department and agency after agency as the most serious roadblock to successful outcomes for individuals and families dealing with mental health and/or substance use issues. A few days ago, you received an action request from the Door County League. You were asked to personally take action and join the League leadership team in advocating for 5 proposals on issues that the League has been supporting. Our goal here today is to share the 5 proposals for which we hope you will advocate. County staff members have generously agreed to be interviewed to explain their proposals. We hope to provide you with the facts you need to influence your elected officials. Please share them with friends and neighbors as well, and help the Door County community influence how these funds are utilized. Our goal is to make sure that these once-in-a-generation funds are used wisely to address some serious issues in our community. After you hear these presentations, we are asking you to do 2 things. First, encourage the county board to support and adopt the proposals on 4 issues: the sober living crisis diversion facility, broadband, childcare, and housing. 2, also encourage your local school board and the members of your municipality, your city council or village or town board that also received additional ARPA funding to support broadband development in your community. We've asked the county department heads to take about 10 minutes each to describe their proposals and to answer the following questions. 1, what is the community problem or need that is being addressed by your proposal? 2, describe your proposal, including how it will work and what it will cost. 3, how will your proposal address the community need? And 4, why should this proposal be prioritized over other proposals to receive funding? And why is it appropriate for the ARPA funding? To begin, I'd like to introduce Ken Pabich, our county administrator, who will speak about broadband services. Ken?
Okay, thank you. Again, hello, Ken Pabich. I'm the county administrator, and I will speak on the broadband. Just to kind of define the need over the past year. Well, we've had anecdotally that we've known that we've had a broadband issue. About a year ago, we actually worked with the Door County Economic Development Corporation, and we, commissioned a study. And as part of that study, there's really a couple aspects to it. One was to, further define what the problem is in the county and to what extent, and then also define what also exists in Door County in terms of existing broadband access. And then try to put together a model or a template in terms of how we can move forward in trying to address the problem with broadband. So that study took about a year to complete. It got done in December, and we held several community meetings just to kind of give the results of the study in terms of how that would move forward. In terms of what the project we're bringing forward to the county board to consider is really just a small piece of the puzzle to bring this all together. In essence, the study itself talked about actually establishing, it's called fiber to home, or FTTP. There's another acronym we all have to learn over the time moving forward. But again, what it is deployment of, again, fiber to the individual homes. And with that, the total project cost, and the way the study kind of outlined it, the total project cost to make that happen, to hit about 60% of the homes in Door County, is about $120 million. So obviously a lot more cost than what we have available in terms of the ARPA money. But what we're hoping to do with our proposal is that we're asking for $1 million to be allocated towards the issue. The funds would be used for bringing on a broadband coordinator position. And that broadband coordinator position would work with all the local communities, really all the stakeholders, the local communities, the existing ISPs, the schools, medical community, all to try to, I guess, start to nibble at this problem and bring broadband to our residents. So again, in terms of our use of the dollars, again, it was $1 million that we're requesting. In terms of the allocation, obviously some of that would go towards the salary of the position itself, but then also some of that money will actually go to the actual infrastructure itself, whether that's working with other communities in terms of providing some support towards their grants, or in some cases, there might be the need to provide what they call kind of like a middle backbone connection between communities. So you might have Bailey's and Sebastopol that are establishing their network, but there needs to be a connection between the two. But it makes sense that it's more of a county connection. So that might be a role that the county would play for that. In terms of how this project would move forward, it's anticipated to be a 5 to 10-year project, depending on what we get in terms of federal funding, as far as grants and overall deployment in working with what they call the ISPs, again, an internet service provider. But the whole scope, again, is about a 5 to 10-year window in terms of that work being done. With ARPA dollars, we know we need to have that expended by 2026. So as part of this proposal, we're looking at funding that position for during that period of time, and again, applying those funds for matching grants or infrastructure itself. In terms of how this allocation of money would address that need, again, it's definitely not going to fund the entire project or our entire need, but we do think it would make a significant improvement in trying to advance the broadband. And I think more importantly, it's going to really help us work together, both from the community level, but also the other stakeholders, to make sure that we're not wasting resources or, again, running resources that are duplicative in nature. Again, this is very expensive in terms of implementation and coordination. So anything that we can do to optimize our expenditures and make this as efficient as possible saves all of the residents not only money, but also makes a very efficient design for the network itself. In terms of, again, why it's a priority, in terms of why we think it's important, again, broadband has been an issue for many, many years. Obviously, though, with how we've changed our economy, but also how we're doing medicine, COVID impacted how we're learning significantly, how we're conducting even this meeting here today. All of these items all relate to the ability to have broadband, and broadband is considered much more of a utility than it is a luxury. So from that standpoint, it is definitely a priority for us, for Door County to remain a viable location for people to live, work, and play. In terms of the actual allocation, it actually qualifies in two ways. Through the ARPA final rules, there is a designation that actually allows for broadband expenses because it's highly encouraged, both from the state and federal level. So it's a specific listing project that can be funded, but also too, once the funds, I guess, are, if you use like a lost revenue method, you'd also can use funds for broadband in that sense. So in terms of a priority, I mean, it hits high in terms of what we need. It's been an issue in Door County for many, many years. It's been identified as, I guess, even from the county board level, but also within the community of, one of the major issues that need to be addressed. So from our standpoint, we think the project kind of hits a lot of those key points, and that's why we're bringing it forward for consideration. And I think I hit all the questions, so I'm all set.
I think you did too. Thank you, Ken. Next, we will have Director of Health and Human Services, Joe Krebsbach, I'd like to introduce to talk about the Sober Living Crisis Diversion Facility proposal. Joe?
Thank you for the opportunity to talk about our proposal. We're looking at a community issue which is ongoing for us in terms of alcohol or drug use throughout Door County for many years. Door County continues to have an issue with individuals with alcohol problem, just like the rest of the country and Wisconsin does. And that's our primary drug of choice up here in Door County, and it's the area where we provide the greatest level of treatment. And we have had a shortage of resources. We do not have a residential treatment facility or a sober living facility in our county. Haven't had one here for years. And so there's always been some need for that level of care that we haven't been able to meet. That need is increasing over the last couple of years as we've seen an increase in both methamphetamines and opiate or heroin use. And the opiates are both in the form of heroin and drug prescriptions. And one of the things that's kind of happened throughout the state of Wisconsin is that we've had an increase in opiate and methamphetamine use over the last 10 to 15 years. And it's slowly making its way to Door County and becoming more of a significant issue. We have doubled the number of individuals we've provided treatment for with those two drug addictions in the last 2 years. And so we see that as potentially continuing to grow. And so we need to try and adjust what we're doing and how we provide services for individuals. In 2021, we also launched a treatment court program, which is a program to try and divert individuals out of the criminal justice system and from going to prison and being able to go through a pretty regimented, highly supervised program that provides sober facilities and sober living and helps individuals kind of get back on the right track. And we've had 6 participants in that program so far, and of the 6, 4 have had to go to some kind of residential treatment, and 3 of those went to some transitional living facility. And so our proposal is really to actually purchase a property for those individuals in Door County. We can do either one property. Ideally, it would be 2 smaller homes that we can use for individuals, but with the goal to have both a home for or a space for males and females to be able to be in our community and work on their recovery while they're here. What's happening currently is we are sending those individuals out of our community to various places, Green Bay, Appleton, Sheboygan, Manitowoc, for those treatment services. And they're developing connections with the recovering community, but they're not home. And so when they come home, they kind of have to start over again. And that's been a real challenge for our folks, particularly in the treatment court program. And so we are not proposing that we provide a treatment center, but rather a sober living home. We're looking to contract then with an outside company that would come in and oversee the activities and the events at the home and the individuals living there. It would be based on a peer support model. So the individuals that would be working with them would also be in recovery and helping them. The benefit to the county right now, we're paying for that service outside to other counties already. And I think the benefit, there's a couple of benefits. One, it gives people a place to go and work on their sober living when they return home. And secondarily, it gets them in a situation where we potentially can avoid the residential treatment altogether. If we have individuals that can live in a sober supervised environment while they're attending intensive outpatient treatment through our agency or through other treatment providers in the community, then they don't have to leave. And we're not paying for those residential services elsewhere. So it really is kind of can fit both the front end of treatment and the back end in supporting individuals. The cost for our proposal is currently at $575,000. That's our request. That would be to purchase a facility and do any upgrades or alterations that we would need to do to make it fit our purposes. And then some money over the next couple of years for maintenance or changes that we would need to do. In terms of why is this a priority? You guys laid a little bit, or you laid a little bit of that out for us, Pat, in your study. This is not a new issue for us. This has been going on for many years. We know it's a shortage in terms of being able to provide options for people in order to really give them the support that they need to change their lives. But it has some impacts all across our community. Certainly it just impacts families, the alcohol and drug use that's going on, but it has potential to impact our child welfare system and increase our costs there. Individuals with drug addictions whose children are placed in foster homes typically take longer to resolve issues and get those kids back. So there's a greater expense for the county in that way, in addition to the costs we're paying just for the residential treatments. But there's impact on law enforcement and hospital and all kinds of areas where being able to provide better outcome or get better outcomes for the individuals we're working with will be beneficial for our community. Again, I think we've got lots of great proposals and areas where we can try and attack some of the problems that we're having here, but this is one that's been an ongoing one and kind of on our radar for many years as we've been trying to figure out alternative options. And as you mentioned, in our minds, or in my mind, this is a one-shot opportunity to be able to use some funding to actually launch a program here that could really have some benefit for many years. And I think I also covered all the questions, probably in less time than I needed, which is unusual for me.
Thank you, Joe. All right, next we'll hear about proposals for childcare initiatives. And I would introduce the Deputy Director of Health and Human Services, Cori McFarlane, and the Director of United Way, Amy Kohnle.
Thanks, Pat. Yes, I've asked Amy to be here with us because she is definitely a primary partner in this childcare initiative, and United Way has laid a lot of the groundwork. So we are looking at this as a partnership between Health and Human Services and United Way. The problem that we're trying to address with this proposal is really that we have a childcare desert here in Door County. We have really a crisis situation within our child care system, and we need to increase the supply of childcare and supports for our overall childcare system in Door County. So we've, through a childcare task force that United Way has facilitated over the past 2 years, we have determined that we have approximately 243 regulated childcare slots in the county and approximately 800 children under the age of 4 who need care. So that's a big gap. Approximately 70% of our children age 4 and under have no regulated early care and education opportunity available to them. This is a problem statewide and nationally, but it's much worse here in Door County. So the gap in Wisconsin is roughly 40% of that gap between the available slots and the number of children needing care. And then nationally is 31%. So 70% here in Door County is significantly more serious than in other places. In Wisconsin, the shortage of infant and toddler care results in an annual economic loss of $1.1 billion. So we know that this is impacting not just the children and families directly in our community, but our entire economy. So it really is a significant need that we all need to pay attention to. We really need to support the providers that we currently have to stabilize the system. If COVID taught us anything, it's that the childcare system we have is very fragile and easily disrupted. So we need a lot of effort to stabilize the situation that we already have and then build upon it. We need to look not just at our regulated group centers, but also our home-based providers. We know that licensed group care is a great option for some families. It's not the answer for everybody, nor can it meet the need for every family in the community. So we need to look at a whole continuum of care options in the county. We want to support the home-based providers, recruit additional home-based providers, help them with things like overcoming barriers to getting licensed or certified, helping them develop a support system and some backup so that if you're a childcare provider in your home and you get sick, where do all those families go for care? We need some system to back them up. We need to look at opportunities for creating a livable wage for all childcare providers and access to ongoing professional development and training for those providers as well to continue to provide really excellent care for kids. The young children across Door County need and deserve high quality early care and education. So this includes not just a safe and clean place for them to go, but also it means care that really attends to their cognitive, physical, social, and emotional development. We have heard loud and clear from our school partners that too many kids are arriving at school not ready to learn because they haven't had that solid foundation early on. So we want to build a system that really helps to address that. As I mentioned, this proposal really builds on the Child Care Task Force that's been in place for over 2 years under the facilitation of United Way, and really work that goes well back way more than 2 years. I know Amy and I have been working on this issue for many, many years, but I'd like Amy to just talk a little bit about that task force and the priorities that were identified in our community for child care needs.
Thank you, Cori, and thank you to the League for having this forum. We really appreciate this. So the 3 areas that came up that we're really going to focus on for the next 3 years through the work of this task force: workforce recruitment, training, and retention. So that's workforce for those childcare centers. We can't just build a building and solve the problem. We know that we need childcare workers, and we need to recognize that they deserve to be paid a livable wage. And how do we keep those childcare workers here? Resources and support systems for our home-based providers is the second area of focus. Those home-based providers play a key role in making sure that that's another option and that they have the supports that they need to care for our young children. And the third area is sustainability. So we want to make sure that we flip this childcare situation upside down, essentially. Nationwide, childcare centers are not working. We know that the funding model is broken. So how do we create sustainability for those centers and for those in-home providers so that we're not always doing the bake sale and the Kringle fundraisers, right? No offense to anybody doing those, but we all know that the minute our children, it used to be when our children start school, we're going to start selling those things. Now, when our kids are 6 weeks old and go to childcare, oh, we're now selling these things. So really looking at those business models and how to make those centers sustainable without having to constantly be in that fundraising mode. As many of you may have heard, we received a $3.5 million grant called the Workforce Innovation Grant back in December. And that grant is really to focus on those licensed group centers. So working on that staffing piece for the licensed group centers, additional trainings that the staff may need there, and then those innovative business models. And that's really the piece that we heard from our state officials, that they were impressed with our application, that we were willing to think outside of the box. So that's really what that grant is here to focus on. It will not address all of the other critical areas of need, especially those home-based providers. So that is the other piece that we need to be working on moving forward. So we want to work to connect and build relationships with our home-based providers. And we know that's a challenge, but we believe it's definitely worth the effort. So we hope that by adding a full-time staff person to focus on those areas of need will help grow that home-based system in addition to the work that we're already doing. And now I'll turn it back over to Cori.
Thanks, Amy. So just a bit more about our proposal. We are requesting $438,500 over 3 years. As Amy mentioned, a major component of that will be a full-time childcare coordinator at the United Way. We would contract the funding with the United Way to support that full-time position. We have managed to kind of piece things together over the past 2 years to do the work of the task force, using one of Amy's staff people who's extremely talented, but has many other projects that she needs to focus on. So we know we need a dedicated full-time person just to focus on childcare. And just to be completely transparent, the Workforce Innovation Grant that United Way received included a full-time coordinator as well. But the county, our department, wrote a letter of support for that grant, indicating our intent to seek ARPA funding to support a position, which would then free up those funds for direct supports, rather than the United Way needing to use the Workforce Innovation Grant for the coordinator position. In addition, we are targeting some of the funding towards those 3 priority areas that Amy mentioned. So support for workforce recruitment, training, and retention needs. We want to designate some of the funding for grants for providers. We'll be doing a study of provider wages and benefits, and really targeting the benefits of this grant to meet some of those unmet needs, those incentives that prove to be most effective with the recruitment and retention efforts. We will evaluate the continued education that's already in place and figure out what the gaps are and find innovative ways to meet those gaps for the current workforce. And then if we look at the future workforce, because we said there's not enough workforce out there right now, we need to grow the workforce. We will be researching and developing training models for licensed and certified family childcare providers. The Door County Economic Development Corporation has a revolving loan fund that's funded in part with county dollars. We'll work closely with them on that loan fund and childcare entrepreneurial training programs that they are looking to implement. We'll reach out to NWTC to explore options for creating a childcare training cohort specific to Door County, so that those courses would be offered right here locally and really help to be kind of a feeding ground for just adding those additional providers to the childcare network. We will look at marketing and recruitment to get people excited about those training opportunities and engaged in them. We'll look at concrete resources and supports for home-based providers. So we will connect and build relationships with them, as Amy mentioned. We plan to host networking opportunities for those providers so that they can build that network of support, recruit some new in-home providers, and look at resources and education that they might need. We'll have a grant program for existing or new home-based childcare providers to become certified, and an entrepreneurial program for new home-based providers. I'm going to have Amy talk just a little bit more about kind of how we have built in a plan for sustainability so that we do not need to rely on ongoing county funding for this childcare proposal.
Thank you again, Cori. We want to really let everybody know that the grant that we received, the Wisconsin Innovation Grant, is a 3-year grant, and we're well aware that this funding is for 3 years as well. So making sure that we do as much work as we possibly can do within that 3-year window. We would not be coming back to the community, the county, looking for additional funds to continue this position. If we choose to have a United Way staff person dedicated to childcare after this, that would be our responsibility to manage that. So we want to make that very clear that even though we're presenting this as a joint request, a partnership, as Cori mentioned, that after the 3 years, if staffing is still needed and we choose to continue that, that becomes our responsibility. Thanks, Cori.
So this connects to ARPA priorities in a couple of ways. 2 primary purposes of ARPA are to address negative economic impacts and to provide equity-focused services. We believe this proposal does both. By addressing the critical childcare issues in Door County, we will help to address the negative economic impacts caused by COVID both on families and children directly that have been impacted, as well as our overall employer community and economy as a whole. We will also provide the equity-focused services by increasing opportunities for all children and families, regardless of income level or other economic status. This is really a priority because the lack of quality early care and education impacts our ability to attract and retain employees. It's a significant driver of all child and family risk factors. The failure to provide quality care and education at an early age impacts our overall systems. Similar to some of the things Joe shared, it's a driver of our child welfare system, our mental health services, incarceration rates, our education system, and more. This is an investment in prevention and early intervention that will have long-lasting and very wide-ranging impacts. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both of you. There are two proposals for affordable housing as use of the ARPA funds. A revolving loan fund is one proposal, and the Mosaic Ventures apartment project is the other. First, we will hear about the Affordable Housing Revolving Loan Fund. And to do that, I'd like to introduce Land Use Services Director Mariah Goode and the Director of Door County Community Foundation, Bret Bicoy.
Thank you. I'm going to start off with some general remarks that relate to affordable housing issues in Door County that pertain to both of these projects, and then I'll turn things over to Bret and Marissa to talk about the projects specifically. So in my role as Director of the Land Use Services Department and in a number of volunteer efforts, my life seems to be consumed by affordable housing issues and has been for much of the last 25 years. And about 25 years ago was when the Door County Economic Development Corporation identified affordable workforce housing as a problem in Door County for employers that were trying to find employees. There's been a lot of work done over the years, but we still have a long ways to go. And there's some new solutions that are coming to the forefront that are pretty exciting. There was a study in 2019 that quantified how much housing we're actually short. That's something that we had not done before, even though there had been several studies previous to that. And the upshot is that Door County, as of 2019, was short hundreds of units of senior housing, hundreds of units of workforce housing, both seasonal and year-round. And we need every configuration of housing you can think of. We need single-family units, we need multifamily units, we need housing for our workforce to be able to purchase, housing for our workforce to be able to rent. So we've made some headway in the last handful of years since that study came out, but I think we're probably even further behind than we were 3 years ago when the study came out. So the two housing proposals that I've put forth under the ARPA requests are two things that have been in the works for a couple of years, just like some of the other projects that you've heard about. These aren't things that we just dreamed up because the ARPA money was there. These are things that have been being worked on for the last couple of years and seem like a very good fit with the ARPA money. So with affordable housing, it's pretty much impossible to build affordable housing without some sort of significant community subsidy in the mix. And Marissa will be able to talk about that in a little bit more detail. With these two particular proposals that we've put forth for the revolving loan fund and then the specific apartment building in Sister Bay, there won't be any ongoing costs to the county government of Door County. This would be a one-time infusion of funds with these ARPA funds into these two particular projects. So there's no county staff person that's being created to do this. I would be the liaison, I assume, between the project and the funders, but there's no positions being created. There's no ongoing cost to the county or anything like that. These really would just be infusions of money to get these programs off the ground. The reason that these two housing proposals in particular have risen to the top as far as ideas for ways to use the ARPA money are because, like I've said, they're ready to go. So Marissa's project, she's literally ready to start putting shovels in the ground in the next couple of months to build her apartment building. And the revolving loan fund program has come out of a Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Authority pilot program that Bret, who's going to talk in a minute, and Marissa and I have all been a part of. And that, so it's perfect timing, I think, to infuse some cash into that project as well. For each project, the proposal is that the county would be putting in $500,000 for the revolving loan fund. That is part of at least a $3 million revolving loan fund pool. And for the housing, affordable housing units in Sister Bay, that's part of a broader $10 million project. So these really are public-private partnership projects as well. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Bret so he can talk about the revolving loan fund in more detail.
Thank you. I think one of the things to keep in mind here is what Mariah commented. This is actually something that's been underway for several years, long before ARPA was even law, right? And monies were ever available to our community. So it's a solution that we've been working on for a problem that has confronted us for a long time, but we've been working on it for the last couple of years in particular. What we recognized several years ago in some conversations that I was having with Mariah and our friends at the City of Sturgeon Bay, as well as our friends at the Door County Economic Development Corporation, is that the solutions that we've been looking at just haven't been working. You know, we didn't really have an idea of what's a useful and viable tool to confront the issue of affordable workforce housing in our county. And so we thought that one of the things that we ought to do is be creative about seeing who can help us figure out what the solution will be. So we set forth an idea where we would convene meetings of people who come from both the usual suspects as well as some of the unusual suspects. So we had the usual suspects, which are people like Mariah, who is obviously very well versed on housing, and Marty Olenichek from the city. We certainly asked for the county board chair and the mayor of the City of Sturgeon Bay to be involved. We got developers like Marissa Downs, who you're going to hear from in a little bit, who was involved in this kind of thing, Sarah Bonovich, another developer. But then we tried to look at people who don't have a direct involvement in housing on a daily basis, but are indirectly involved because of their businesses, because of their place in the community, or just because they're people who care and smart folks in our community. So we've got, you know, the people like Dave Elliott, who runs the Peninsula Pulse and Door County Living magazine. You know, Eric Pfeiffer from Marine Travel Lift. We have Michelle Knotts from Scandia Village. We had religious leaders. We had all kinds of folks that created a design team to look at possibilities and what might be solutions. And the Community Foundation was convening these folks to talk about what's a different way that we can approach our problem in our community. We held countless numbers of focus group meetings with everything from developers themselves to interested business parties, as well as people who actually will live in the housing that we're talking about and are actually confronting the problem in a real way. And what we came up with is a revolving loan fund, which is actually what we're talking about here, but really it's a bigger initiative than this. It's about creating a new corporation. It's going to be a workforce housing corporation that the Community Foundation is launching in partnership with NeighborWorks Green Bay, which is a charity whose sole purpose is to look at affordable housing in all of Northeast Wisconsin, but we're creating a corporation first and foremost to focus on our community in particular. The idea is that we will work with our friends at WHEDA, the Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Authority, who've agreed to put forth $1.5 million to this effort if we can match that by finding at least another $1.5 million locally, of which this is where Mariah had the idea, is that this would be a good contribution for the county to make because it would both double the impact and would have a tremendous impact in terms of its ability to invest in housing in our community. Obviously, it's more than that, though. We've got we're going to need to raise additional dollars to help operate the corporation. Our goal here is to get the institution that we are creating, the new corporation, qualified as something called a community development financial institution. There are only 2 or 3, or a very small number of them in the state of Wisconsin focused on affordable housing. And the CDFIs, once they are created, have access to something called the CDFI fund at the U.S. Department of Treasury, which is an ongoing additional place we could look to dollars to help develop and create affordable housing units in our community. But it all begins with the first $3 million of this loan pool. There's efforts and discussions afoot, which will involve down payment assistance programs being merged into this. So we'll be looking at housing from an ownership perspective and a variety of other things. But the whole key for us is to create a loan pool, not to finance housing alone, but to deal with a unfortunate reality of the cost of developing housing in our community. The reality is that housing construction nowadays is basically become a regional thing, right? Construction companies don't just work in their county; they work in large regions. I mean, I think of Albert's Plastering down the road here in Door County. Polly Alberts would tell me that they've even done projects in Minnesota. You know, contractors go all over the place. What that means is the cost of developing units is not specific to the county, it's a regional expense. It's the same basically if we're going to build a unit, if we're going to build a multifamily unit in Door County, if we're building it in Milwaukee, if we're building it in Dane County. The challenge is that to qualify for a lot of the dollars that are available, the money that the developer can charge in terms of rent is capped as a percentage of county median income. And our county median income is less than it would be in a lot of the urban communities. So you've got a developer who's paying the same amount to develop the property, but in our community, they can make less money from developing of it in terms of what's allowable in rents. So we have a shortfall, a funding gap. And the goal of this pool is not to fund the entirety of the project. The goal in it is to provide flexible, cheap, long-term capital, which will help fill that funding gap to remove the disincentive that most developers have to build that unit in Door County. Because the reality is they could build that same unit in an urban area and make more money. We have to create a situation where we level the playing field and maybe even put our thumb on the scale so that a little bit of it is leaning in our direction to encourage the development of these units in our community. Now, the pool, of course, is going to be revolving, so loans will go out over many years. But the thought is the initial $3 million pool that we're talking about creating over the duration of the pool could generate more than 700 affordable housing units here in the county. When you consider we have a population of less than 30,000 people, that is a whoppingly big number in terms of its impact on our community over a long period of time. And so that, in a nutshell, is what we're trying to accomplish. It's a much bigger initiative than just the loan pool itself, but this is a linchpin that makes everything else possible. If we don't get the loan pool started, we can't qualify for CDFI status, which means we can't access U.S. Department of Treasury money. A lot of these things start here. So this is what a plan that we've been working on, and Mariah was kind enough to advance it forward to the county board to see whether or not the county would be so kind as to see whether it wanted to make a $500,000 investment, which we could then match with dollars that we receive from WIDA.
All right, thank you, Bret. And then next, I'm going to hand things over to Marissa Downs, who is the developer for a 45-unit apartment building in Sister Bay that would be right next to Northern Door Children's Center, actually.
Thank you, and thanks to the League of Women's Voters for hosting this. This is great to be able to give some color to the development proposal that I have put forward. And Bret did a lot of my work, like gave a lot of the details that now I don't have to spend time going over. So thanks, Bret. But yes, so here I'm here to talk about a 45-unit affordable housing development in Sister Bay. This would be developed through the Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Authority, the same WIDA that participated on the rural pilot that Bret was talking about. And for the projects that are funded through WIDA's program, affordability is locked in for 30 years. So it truly is something that's monitored by me as the developer and owner and monitored by the state. So it is not something that we just talk about, but we don't do. So it does make a huge impact on the affordability and availability for those workforce housing families and individuals who need a unit. Like Mariah mentioned, it's located next to the Northern Door Children's Center, and it will help provide critical housing that is income-based, meaning that residents have to earn a certain income or below to be able to live there. Rent is paid, but the income qualification is what would allow for a resident to be able to access these units. And I think that that's a distinction that's important, especially as we see that seasonal residents are renting market rate apartments for the year and maybe only using it during the high season, right? But they take a unit offline and are fine to pay the rent for the entire year and just access those apartments when they want to. These apartments would not be able to be accessed like that. And I think that that's a really important distinction because they are available for Door County residents and workforce to live in and rent. So that's a really important distinction as part of this program as well. The overall budget for my development is $10.5 million, and it seems like rising every day. And the $500,000 request that I've made for the ARPA dollars is just a really small percentage of that, but every part helps. I've already been able to access some money from the state home funds. I was awarded another grant. These are all, $500,000, $600,000 grants, but they start to chip away at the overall gap, like Bret talked about. I mean, the gap is exactly why, as Bret mentioned, developers aren't incentivized to do these projects. WIDA does, and just so there's a little understanding of the program, they do an annual allocation of these credits. They're done throughout the state. Everybody across the state who's interested in developing affordable housing comes in to access these credits. It's very competitive. And what I've been able to discern too, and this is why I think in this particular case, it's a really once in a 20-year opportunity for us, is that since 2000, Door County as a whole has been able to build 196 units through this program, because they're competing, developers are competing for the money to fund these units against developers building a project in Milwaukee, Madison, Appleton, and it's just, you're not going to get one very often. So the project I'm talking about already was awarded credits in 2021. So we have this opportunity. The last credits that were awarded in Northern Door were 24 units in 2012, and there hasn't been one since. So this opportunity will really be impactful to the amount of units outside of Sturgeon Bay, especially, and will really be able to help a lot of the individuals and families looking for this housing. This project also will be able to impact the supply within 1 year from today. I am almost through all my approvals. I would put a shovel in the ground in June, and we would be able to start putting families and individuals in these units by the end of the year. And so I think that this is something that we can really see in the short term. We all know that construction costs are going up, interest rates are poised to be increased. And as Bret mentioned, market rate developers are able to somewhat react to these increases by raising rents. And that's why we see some of the new housing supply that does come to the county starting to rent at $1,200 for a 2-bedroom, $1,300 a month. These are high cost, they're high rental market rate units. When we look at affordable housing, the rent, again, is tied to the county median income. So you can't raise it. So when my construction costs go up or the interest rates go up, my rents don't go up. Unlike we see that market rate developers are able to do. That's why no developers want to do this, because it's really hard to get done. So I think that I really covered all my questions here. Oh, the ARPA rules are really clear on utilizing ARPA funding to construct affordable housing. It's an approved use. So we know that that's already been put forward by the League of Counties, and that my request is also a one-time request. So it's just the $500,000 to get these units built, and there won't be any ongoing need after that. So thank you so much for letting me have this time to talk about it.
Marissa, thank you. And thanks to everyone today for presenting the proposals, and to all of you who sign in to listen to hear about all of the proposals. So for our league members, please refer to your action request email for information on how to contact your officials to share your opinions, whatever they may be. Watch for future action updates on these issues from the league. Whether you agree with the league's view or not, please advocate and be vocal for what you believe. This video will be posted on the league website and our Facebook page. So thanks again for watching.